The night sky above New Horizon glittered with stars, a serene canopy over the human colony perched on the galaxy's edge. Silver domes reflected artificial sunlight, sheltering families who had carved a life from the void. Hydroponic gardens stretched across the terrain, their lush greens a symbol of resilience. Children darted through parks, their energy uncontained, chasing, climbing, building, a fragile harmony in an unforgiving universe. Mia, a small girl with untamed curls, dashed through the gardens, her teddy bear bouncing against her side. Alex, tall and wiry, guided a group of younger kids in a flickering holographic game. Jake, reserved and sharp-eyed, sat beneath a tree, lost in a book about Earth's forgotten wars. Sarah scaled a jungle gym with relentless grit, her movements bold. Timmy, barely 5, crouched in the sand, shaping a castle, his toy spaceship perched beside him. The piece shattered without warning. Shadows swallowed the stars as colossal ships materialized overhead, their sleek obsidian hulls blotting out the light. The Zorathians, ruthless conquerors of worlds, had arrived. To them, humans were insignificant, their children mere resources to exploit. Alarms erupted, piercing the air with shrill urgency. Red lights pulsed, bathing the colony in an eerie glow. Parents surged from homes and work posts, panic driving their steps. The alien soldiers descended, their armored forms glinting like beetle shells, movements precise and unyielding. They stormed schools, homes, playgrounds, seizing children with calculated force. Mia dove behind a bush, clutching her teddy bear, but a clawed hand yanked her free. Alex swung a fist at a soldier, only to be pinned effortlessly. Jake's book tumbled to the ground, pages fluttering as he was dragged away. Sarah thrashed, her defiance fierce but futile. Timmy was lifted gently, almost tenderly, his toy spaceship left abandoned in the sand. A man lunged with a pipe, striking a soldier's armor, only to crumple under a swift counterblow. A woman gripped her child, her screams echoing as the boy was torn from her arms. The Zorathians pressed forward, indifferent to the chaos they left behind. The captured children were funneled into the ships, some trembling, others numb. The vessels sealed shut with a menacing hiss, engines igniting in a deafening roar. The ground quaked as they ascended, tearing away from New Horizon. Below, parents collapsed, their anguished cries swallowed by the fading rumble. Inside the lead ship, the air hung heavy, tinged with metal and dread. The children were crowded into a vast chamber, its walls smooth and cold. Etched with glowing alien runes. Mia's gaze flickered to Sarah, both wide-eyed and shaken. Alex stood rigid, fists tight, masking his fear with a forced calm. Jake's eyes roamed, cataloging every corner. Timmy pressed close to Mia, his small hands gripping his knees. The ship jolted, hurtling deeper into space. Faint, guttural sounds filtered through the walls, distorted by a translation device humming in the background. Fragments of intent emerged, chilling glimpses of the aliens' purpose. The children's minds, young and unformed, were ideal for reshaping, for molding into tools of obedience. Mia's chest tightened, the weight of it sinking in. Alex's breath hitched, his resolve hardening. Jake's mind churned, piecing together a response. Sarah's fear twisted into fury, her hands balling into fists. Timmy, sensing the shift, shrank closer to Mia. They wouldn't surrender to this fate. Mia's eyes caught on a narrow vent near the floor. She nudged Timmy, who wriggled over and peered inside. It was tight, but possible. With a silent signal from Alex, they acted. Timmy squeezed through first, followed by Mia, then Jake, Sarah, and Alex. The tunnel was suffocating, alive with the ship's mechanical pulse, but they pressed on. They spilled into a cramped room lined with screens and controls. Jake's face lit with recognition. This was a nerve center. He approached a console, fingers tracing alien symbols, instinct guiding him. Sarah took up guard by the door, her pulse racing. An alarm shrieked, red lights slashing the shadows. The ship had sensed their breach. Jake's hands flew across the controls, seeking a way to seal them in. Too late, the door hissed open, and Zorathian soldiers stormed inside. Sarah snatched a loose rod from the floor and swung, catching a soldier off guard. The others bolted, Alex herding them through the narrowing gap. They fled into the ship's labyrinthine corridors, dodging patrols, weaving through darkness. At last, they stumbled into a cluttered maintenance bay and barricaded the door with scavenged debris. Mia slumped against the wall, teddy bear pressed to her chest. Timmy curled beside her, exhaustion overtaking him. Jake rummaged through the room, hunting for anything useful. Sarah lingered by the door, ears straining for footsteps. Alex paced, mind ablaze with half-formed plans. For now, they were hidden. Jake gestured subtly, conveying ideas without words. Watch, learn, exploit. They'd find others, build their strength. When the moment came, they'd fight. Mia gazed at her companions, drawing courage from their unspoken bond. Memories of her grandfather's tales surfaced, stories of humans who defied the impossible. They could do this. They would. In the dim maintenance bay, amid the ship's ceaseless hum, the children braced themselves. They were far from home, but not broken. They were human, and humans endure. The holding cell was a cold, sterile box of gleaming metal. Its walls stretched smooth and unbroken, save for faint glowing runes etched into their surface. Overhead, dim lights pulsed like a heartbeat, casting eerie shadows that slithered across the floor. The air hung heavy with a sharp tang of ozone and a metallic undertone, an alien scent that clung to everything. Mia sat pressed against the wall, her teddy bear hugged tight, its frayed fur a lifeline to a world she'd lost. Around her, the others sat or stood in tense silence, each wrestling with their own fears. Alex paced, his boots tapping a restless rhythm. His sharp eyes scanned every inch of the cell, hunting for an escape. Jake sat cross-legged, staring at the runes, his brow furrowed as he tried to unravel their secrets. Sarah lingered by the door, her fingers probing its edges for a flaw. Timmy, the smallest, curled beside Mia, his breaths shallow and quick. Silence pressed down like a weight, broken only by the distant thrum of the ship's engines. Hours bled into days, or so it seemed in this windowless cage. Sleep was a stranger, driven off by the gnawing dread of what awaited them on Zorath Prime. A sharp hiss split the air as the door slid open. 2 Zorathian soldiers loomed in the threshold, their armored bodies glinting under the lights. One carried a tray of wobbling, iridescent cubes. Food, maybe? The other held a sleek device that hummed with a soft blue glow. The children stiffened, drawing closer without a word. The tray clattered to the floor, and the soldier gestured at it. The cubes shimmered, their colors shifting unnaturally. Hunger clawed at their insides, but distrust held them still. Mia glanced at Alex, who gave a curt nod. They couldn't afford weakness. One by one, they took a cube, its surface slick and cool. The taste was flat, metallic, but it dulled the ache in their bellies. The second soldier activated the device, and a hologram flickered to life. Symbols and images spun in the air, scenes of Zorathian life. Dark spires pierced alien skies, armies moved in lockstep, and young Zorathians stood in rows, their eyes blank, their spirits crushed. The message was unmistakable. Obedience was power. Resistance was pointless. Mia's fingers dug into her teddy bear. She thought of her grandfather's tales, humans who defied empires, who turned weakness into strength. The Zorathians saw them as frail, but they didn't know the fire that burned in human hearts. The soldiers watched them, their visored faces blank. Then they left, the door sealing with a whisper. The hologram faded, and silence returned. Alex's voice cut through it, low and firm. "We're not staying here. We need a way out." Jake nodded, his eyes still on the runes. "These symbols, they might control the ship. If I can crack them, we could open the door." Sarah flexed her hands, determination flashing in her gaze. "I'll find a weak spot, something we can use." Timmy's small voice piped up. "I can fit in tight places. Maybe there's a vent." Mia met his eyes, her chest tightening with pride. "Together," she said. "We'll do it together." They set to work, hands and minds probing their prison. Jake traced the runes, muttering as patterns emerged. Sarah and Alex tackled the door, prying at it with bits of the tray. Timmy squeezed into a corner, searching for hidden openings. Mia stood guard, her ears straining for any sign of the soldiers' return. Her thoughts drifted to her family, to the colony's fate. She wouldn't let it end here. Jake's sudden gasp broke her reverie. "I've got it." He pointed to a cluster of runes. "This controls the air or power. If I tweak it, it might trip the lock." Alex leaned in. "Do it." Jake pressed the runes in sequence. A hum rose, the lights flickered, and the door clicked, easing open a hair. Sarah jammed her fingers into the gap, pulling with Alex until it gaped wide enough for Timmy. Go, Mia whispered. Find a panel, anything. Timmy slipped through, vanishing into the corridor. The others waited, breaths held, time stretching thin. Mia's pulse thundered, hope battling fear. The door jolted open fully, and Timmy grinned from the other side. I did it! They spilled out, the corridor's cool air a shock after the cell's staleness. The ship unfolded around them, sleek, endless passages lit by pulsing glows, walls marked with cryptic symbols. They moved fast, ducking into shadows at every sound of boots. A massive viewport halted them. Beyond it, hyperspace blazed, a torrent of streaking stars as the ship sped toward Zorath Prime. The beauty twisted Mia's gut. It was a cage hurtling through the void. We'll get back, she murmured, her hand on the glass. We will. A clang rang out, followed by heavy steps. The children froze. A patrol. Here, Sarah hissed, shoving them toward a door. They darted in, the door hissing shut behind them. The room buzzed with machinery, panels blinking with alien lights. Jake's eyes sparked, but there was no time to linger. The footsteps paused outside. The children pressed against the walls, silent, still. After endless seconds, the sound retreated. Mia exhaled, shaky. We can't hide forever, Alex said. We need a plan. Jake nodded. If I can hack the systems, maybe I can mess with their plans or call for help. Sarah grinned. I'll find weapons, anything to fight back. Timmy added, maybe there's other kids. We could team up. Mia looked at them, her fear hardening into resolve. The Zorathians had misjudged them. That was their edge. As they searched the room, Mia spotted a glowing orb on a stand. She touched it, and it flared, projecting a holographic map. They crowded around, awestruck. It mapped the ship, the bridge, engines, cells, and a reconditioning chamber. Mia's stomach dropped. That was their fate, to be broken, remade. We stopped them, she said, voice steady. We saved the others. Alex's jaw tightened. Yeah, but smart. We're not enough alone. Jake pointed. There's a maintenance shaft we could move unseen. Sarah's eyes lit up. Let's go. They memorized the map, then slipped out, racing for the shaft. In the ship's dark underbelly, hope flickered alive. They were young, outnumbered, but they were human. And humans didn't give up. The Zorathians had taken them, but they hadn't won. Not yet. Sarah grinned. I'll find weapons, anything to fight back. Timmy added, maybe there's other kids we could team up. Mia looked at them, her fear hardening into resolve. The Zorathians had misjudged them. That was their edge. As they searched the room, Mia spotted a glowing orb on a stand. She touched it, and it flared, projecting a holographic map. They crowded around, awestruck. It mapped the ship, the bridge, engines, cells, and a reconditioning chamber. Mia's stomach dropped. That was their fate, to be broken, remade. We stopped them, she said, voice steady. We saved the others. Alex's jaw tightened. Yeah, but smart. We're not enough alone. Jake pointed. There's a maintenance shaft. We could move unseen. Sarah's eyes lit up. Let's go. They memorized the map, then slipped out, racing for the shaft. In the ship's dark underbelly, hope flickered alive. They were young, outnumbered, but they were human, and humans didn't give up. The Zorathians had taken them, but they hadn't won. Not yet. The maintenance shaft stretched ahead, a narrow tunnel of cold, unyielding metal. Shadows clung to the walls, broken only by the faint flicker of overhead lights. The air hung heavy, stale, recycled, laced with the sharp tang of oil and machinery. Mia led the way, her teddy bear tucked tightly under one arm, her knees scraping the rough floor with every cautious movement. Behind her, Alex, Jake, Sarah, and Timmy followed, their breaths hushed, their steps measured. A single misplaced sound could betray them to the Zorathians. The shaft twisted like a maze beneath the ship's surface, its walls pressing in tighter with each turn. At a junction, 3 dark paths branched off. Jake, his mind still sharp with the memory of the holographic map, pointed left with a quick gesture. No words passed between them, just a shared glance, a silent agreement. They moved as a unit, trusting his instincts. As they pressed deeper, faint echoes drifted through the vents, harsh, alien voices. Zorathian technicians, their words filtered through the ship's translation system, reached Mia's ears as she paused near a grate. She leaned closer, catching snippets. The human younglings are adaptable, perfect for the program. Once the control chips are implanted, they'll serve without resistance. The words sank into her like ice. Control chips, devices to erase their freedom, their very selves. She looked back at the others, their faces pale but set with determination. They understood the stakes now. Ahead, the shaft constricted further, a crumpled section blocking their path. Jagged metal beams protruded, forcing them to stop. Sarah's sharp eyes caught a small access panel on the wall. With a nod from Alex, she pried it open, revealing a storage room beyond. One by one, they wriggled through, landing quietly on the other side. The room was dim, stacked with crates that glowed faintly from within. Each held orbs like the one Mia had found earlier. Strange, luminous spheres. Jake's gaze sharpened as he studied them. Data storage, he realized. Secrets of the Zorathians' technology might lie inside, a weapon waiting to be claimed. Timmy, restless and inquisitive, brushed his fingers against an orb. It flared to life, projecting a hologram into the air. A Zorathian scientist materialized, its voice flat and precise. The reconditioning process maps their neural pathways, then implants the control chips. Obedience is immediate and absolute. The image shifted, a sterile lab, human children strapped to tables, machines hovering over them. Their eyes stared blankly, stripped of fight. Mia's chest tightened. Those could be their friends, or them if they failed. Before they could process it, a piercing alarm shattered the silence. Red lights pulsed, bathing the room in a bloody glow. Their presence had been detected. Footsteps echoed, heavy and deliberate. Zorathian soldiers were closing in. Alex's lips formed a silent command. Hide. They darted behind the crates, melting into the shadows. The door slid open with a hiss, and two armored figures stormed in, their visors glinting as they scanned the room. Mia pressed herself flat, her teddy bear squeezed against her chest. Timmy shivered beside her, his small frame rigid. Sarah's hand lingered near a loose rod, her body coiled to strike if cornered. The soldiers advanced, their shadows stretching long and menacing. One paused, its head tilting as if it sensed their presence. Mia's heart thundered. Sarah's gaze flicked upward, a ventilation duct, high but reachable. She tapped Alex, who nodded. As the soldiers' attention shifted to a flickering orb, the children seized their chance. Alex hoisted Timmy up, then Mia, Jake, and Sarah. They pulled themselves into the duct, its edges biting into their hands just as the soldiers turned back. The passage was tight, claustrophobic, but it carried them away. They crawled swiftly, the metal cool beneath them, until it spilled them into a sprawling chamber, the ship's engineering section. Towering engines dominated the space, their surfaces alive with pulsing light. Machinery hummed and whirred, a symphony of alien power. Jake's eyes widened, a mix of awe and calculation flickering across his face. This was the ship's core, a place they could break if they dared. Through a viewport, movement caught their attention. A group of human children shuffled past, escorted by guards. Their faces were hollow, eyes dull and glassy, already touched by the reconditioning. Mia recognized some from New Horizon, and anger flared through her fear. She clutched her teddy bear tighter, resolve hardening. Alex's fists clenched, his mind racing for a plan. Jake eyed a nearby control panel. If he could access it, he might disrupt the chips or the process itself. Sarah pointed to catwalks overhead, a vantage point she could scout from. Timmy spotted narrow ducts branching off, spaces he could slip through to gather more. They exchanged looks, their strengths aligning in the silence. The Zorathians saw them as prey, weak and small. But they were wrong. The engines throbbed louder, a reminder of the power arrayed against them. Yet in the shadows, the children moved with purpose, their plan taking shape. They would save their own, turn the Zorathian strength against them, and carve a path home. For they were not just children, they were fighters. The engineering chamber pulsed with life, a vast cavern of alien machinery bathed in eerie, shifting light. Massive conduits snaked across the ceiling, humming with energy, while towering reactors loomed like silent sentinels. The air thrummed with heat and static, thick with the scent of molten metal and ozone. Mia crouched behind a coolant tank, her teddy bear pressed against her chest, its familiar weight grounding her in the chaos. Alex, Jake, Sarah, and Timmy fanned out nearby, their shadows blending into the flickering glow of the engines. Through the chamber's viewport, they'd glimpse the hollow-eyed children, victims of the Zorathians' reconditioning. The sight had ignited something fierce within them, a refusal to let that fate claim them too. Here, in the ship's beating heart, they could strike back. Jake's sharp gaze locked onto a control panel, its surface studded with glowing runes. The map from the orb lingered in his mind. This station regulated power flow, a vital artery of the ship. Disrupt it, and chaos might follow. He crept forward, his fingers brushing the console, tracing patterns he'd begun to understand. Sarah climbed a nearby ladder with cat-like grace, reaching a catwalk that overlooked the chamber. From her perch, she scanned for threats. Guards, cameras, anything that could undo them. Her hands tightened on the railing, knuckles whitening as she spotted a patrol entering through a distant hatch. Alex stayed low, guiding Timmy toward a cluster of ducts branching from the floor. The boy's small frame was their secret weapon. He could slip where others couldn't. Timmy nodded, eyes wide but steady, and vanished into the narrow passage, his footsteps swallowed by the machinery's roar. Mia edged closer to Jake, her heart pounding as he worked. The panel flickered under his touch, runes pulsing in erratic bursts. A low groan echoed through the chamber, the engines responding, their rhythm faltering. Mia's breath caught. They were doing this. Sarah signaled from above, a sharp wave of her hand. The patrol was closing in, 4 Zorathian soldiers, their armor glinting as they moved with mechanical precision. She dropped flat, her body pressed to the catwalk, watching them split to inspect the reactors. Below, Jake's movements quickened. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he rerouted power, overloading a secondary system. A shrill whine rose, piercing the air, and sparks erupted from a conduit overhead. The soldiers froze, heads swiveling toward the disturbance. Alex darted to a shadowed corner, grabbing a loose wrench from the floor. He hurled it across the room, striking a pipe with a resounding clang. The sound ricocheted, drawing the patrol's attention away from Jake. 2 soldiers advanced toward the noise, their weapons raised, while the others lingered near the reactors. Timmy emerged from the duct, clutching a small, glowing cylinder he'd found, a power cell, unstable and volatile. He scurried to Mia, pressing it into her hands. Her eyes widened. It was dangerous, but it could be their edge. She nodded to Jake, who gestured toward a coolant tank, a perfect target. Mia hesitated, then steeled herself. With a silent count, she lobbed the cylinder. It arced through the air, striking the tank with a crack. A blinding flash erupted, followed by a deafening boom. Coolant sprayed in a frigid mist, shrouding the chamber in chaos. The soldiers staggered, disoriented, their visors fogging with ice. Jake seized the moment, slamming his hand on the panel. The engines screeched, their lights dimming as power surged uncontrollably. Alarms blared, red beams slashing through the haze. The ship lurched, a violent shudder rippling through its frame. Sarah leapt from the catwalk, landing beside Alex. Together, they raced to regroup with Mia and Jake, who were already pulling Timmy from the duct's edge. The children ducked behind a reactor as the soldiers rallied, their guttural shouts cutting through the din. Through the mist, a new threat emerged, a Zorathian technician, its elongated limbs wielding a scanning device. It swept the room, narrowing in on their heat signatures. Mia's pulse raced. They couldn't hide much longer. Sarah pointed to a service hatch on the far wall, half hidden by tangled cables. Alex nodded, and they moved, slipping through the chaos. The technician's device beeped, closing the distance, but the children reached the hatch first. Jake pried it open with trembling hands, and they tumbled inside, sealing it behind them. The new passage was a tight crawl space, its walls slick with condensation. They pressed forward, the ship's tremors shaking dust loose around them. Mia's mind churned. Had their sabotage freed anyone? Slowed the Zorathians? She couldn't know yet, but the act itself fueled her resolve. The crawl space opened into a dimly lit chamber, smaller and quieter. Rows of pods lined the walls, each humming faintly. Alex approached one, peering through its translucent shell. Inside lay a human child, wires snaking from its skull, another victim of the chips. Mia's stomach twisted, anger flaring anew. Jake examined a nearby terminal, its screen alive with data, schematics of the reconditioning process. His fingers hesitated, then began to type, searching for a way to reverse it or shut it down. Sarah stood guard, her body tense, while Timmy huddled close to Mia. The pods glowed ominously, a reminder of what awaited them if they failed. But they'd struck a blow. Disrupted the ship's own discord. The Zorathians would feel it. The terminal beeped, and Jake's face tightened. He'd found something, a subroutine to delay the process, maybe disable a batch of chips. He activated it, and several pods flickered, their hum faltering. A distant explosion rocked the ship, likely a chain reaction from their sabotage. Mia met the other's eyes, a shared spark passing between them. They weren't just surviving, they were fighting. The chamber's door rattled, heavy boots approaching. Time was up. They darted for another exit, disappearing into the ship's depths, leaving chaos in their wake. The Zorathians had underestimated them, and that mistake would burn. The ship's underbelly hummed with restless energy, a labyrinth of ducts and shadowed corridors. Dust swirled in the dim light, shaken loose by tremors from the sabotaged engines. Mia clutched her teddy bear, its worn fur a tether to her fading memories of home. She led the group, her small frame weaving through the tight passage with Alex, Jake, Sarah, and Timmy close behind. The air was thick, hot and metallic, laced with the acrid bite of burned circuits. Every step echoed faintly, a reminder of the danger stalking them. Their sabotage had left its mark. Distant alarms wailed, their shrieks bouncing off the walls, while intermittent shudders rattled the ship. The Zorathians would be hunting now, their cold efficiency turned to fury. But the children pressed on, driven by the flickering hope they'd sparked in the pod chamber. Some of the reconditioning machines had faltered, their lights dimmed. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was a crack in the enemy's armor. The passage widened into a low-ceilinged room, its walls lined with humming panels and tangled cables. A faint glow pulsed from a central console, its surface alive with shifting symbols. Jake's eyes lit up, drawn to it like a moth to flame. This wasn't just a control hub. It was a communication array, a lifeline to the outside. Mia paused, catching her breath, while Sarah scanned the room's edges for threats. Alex stood watch at the entrance, his body tense, ready to move. Timmy, ever curious, slipped toward a vent, peering into its dark maw. The ship groaned again, a deep, mournful sound, and Mia's grip tightened on her bear. They couldn't linger. Jake approached the console, his fingers hovering over the runes. Patterns clicked into place, fragments he'd pieced together from the ship's systems. This could send a signal, he realized, a call beyond the Zorathians' reach, to human colonies, to ships, to anyone who might hear. His hands moved with quiet precision, rerouting power, bypassing locks. Sarah's sharp intake of breath broke the silence. Through a narrow viewport, she spotted movement. Zorathian soldiers, their armor glinting as they swept the corridors below. Time was bleeding away. Jake's work quickened, sweat beading on his brow. The console flared, a holographic display blooming above it, a star chart dotted with human outposts. Mia's heart leapt. New Horizon was there, a faint blip on the edge. Jake adjusted settings, crafting a message in bursts of code, a distress call, laced with their location and a plea. Children taken. Zorathian ship. Help. Alex glanced back, urgency in his stance. The soldiers were nearing their level, their boots a rhythmic thud. Sarah gestured to a pile of crates. Cover, if it came to that. Timmy wriggled free from the vent, clutching a small, jagged tool he'd found, a makeshift weapon. The console chirped, the signal sent. A faint pulse rippled outward, invisible but alive. Jake's shoulders sagged with relief, but there was no time to savor it. The door hissed, metal grinding as it began to part. Sarah lunged, shoving a crate into the gap, slowing the breach. Alex joined her, muscles straining as they braced it. Shadows loomed beyond. Soldiers, their visors catching the light. Mia grabbed Timmy, pulling him behind the console, her mind racing. Jake yanked cables from the wall, sparking a cascade of static to mask their retreat. The crate buckled, and the door burst open. 3 Zorathians stormed in, their weapons raised, scanning the haze. Sarah rolled aside, snatching Timmy's tool and hurling it at a soldier's visor. It cracked, the alien staggering, buying precious seconds. Alex pointed to the vent Timmy had explored. A tight escape. Mia went first, her teddy bear scraping the edges, followed by Timmy, then Jake. Sarah and Alex held the line, dodging energy blasts that scorched the walls. A soldier lunged, its claw grazing Sarah's arm, but she twisted free, diving into the vent as Alex followed. The passage was suffocating, its walls pressing in, but adrenaline drove them forward. Behind, the soldiers' shouts faded, drowned by the ship's ceaseless hum. They emerged into a storage bay, its ceiling high and vaulted, stacked with glowing containers. Breathless, they collapsed against the wall, the signal's success a fragile victory. Mia's gaze drifted upward, imagining their message streaking through the void. Would it reach anyone? She thought of her parents, of New Horizons' defenses, small but fierce. Jake wiped his hands, his mind already turning to the next step. The Zorathians wouldn't expect this, he knew. It was a gamble, but it shifted the game. Sarah flexed her scratched arm, pain sharpening her focus. She scanned the bay, an arsenal of alien tech, maybe tools to fight with. Timmy poked at a container, its lid easing open to reveal sleek, cylindrical devices. Grenades, perhaps. His small hands hesitated, then gripped one, resolve hardening. The ship jolted, a violent lurch that sent crates sliding. Their sabotage was still rippling, destabilizing systems. Through a cracked skylight, stars streaked past. Hyperspace, relentless and vast. They were closer to Zorath Prime, Mia sensed, the clock ticking louder. Alex rose, his silhouette steady against the chaos. They'd sent the signal, but survival demanded more. He gestured toward a shadowed stairwell, deeper into the ship, toward the bridge or the imprisoned. Sarah nodded, hefting a cylinder. Jake pocketed a shard of tech from the console, a backup plan forming. Mia stood, her teddy bear a quiet defiance. The Zorathians thought them weak, controllable. But weakness was a lie they'd unravel, thread by thread. They moved as one, slipping into the stairwell, the signals echo their first real strike. The fight was just beginning. The stairwell descended into the ship's depths, a spiraling chute of cold steel and flickering shadows. Each step rattled underfoot, the metal worn smooth by unseen hands. Mia gripped her teddy bear, its fur damp with sweat, as she led the way, her small frame tense with purpose. Alex followed, his sharp eyes darting to every corner. Jake clutched a shard of scavenged tech, its edges biting into his palm. Sarah carried the alien cylinder, possibly a grenade, her scratched arm a dull ache she ignored. Timmy brought up the rear, his small hands steady despite the fear in his wide eyes. The air grew denser, thick with the hum of machinery and a faint, sickly sweetness. Something alive, or once alive, lingered here. The ship shuddered again, its frame groaning from their earlier sabotage. Lights flickered overhead, casting jagged patterns across the walls. They'd sent their signal, a desperate cry into the void, but survival now demanded boldness. The stairwell opened into a cavernous chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. Rows of cylindrical cages lined the floor, each glowing faintly, their translucent shells revealing human forms inside. Children, dozens of them, suspended in stillness. Wires snaked from their skulls, pulsing with faint light, a grotesque echo of the reconditioning pods they'd seen before. Mia's breath caught, recognizing faces from New Horizon, friends, neighbors, stolen lives. Alex's fists tightened, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. Jake's analytical gaze swept the room, landing on a central console, a nexus of cables and screens controlling the cages. Sarah's grip on the cylinder hardened. This was a prison she'd shatter. Timmy shrank closer to Mia, his small frame trembling but resolute. A rhythmic thud broke the silence, Zorathian guards approaching from a side passage. The children ducked behind a cage, its cold surface leaching heat from their skin. 3 soldiers emerged, their armor scarred and glinting, weapons slung across their backs. One carried a scanner, its beam sweeping the room, hunting for the source of the ship's unrest. Mia's pulse raced as the beam neared. She pressed her teddy bear tighter, her mind flashing to her grandfather's tales, humans outwitting giants. Jake signaled silently, pointing to the console. If they could free the captives, they'd have numbers, a chance. Alex nodded, his jaw set. Sarah moved first, creeping along the cage's shadows, her cylinder ready. She reached a junction box near the guards, its exposed wires sparking faintly. With a quick twist, she jammed the cylinder inside, disrupting its flow. A sharp crack erupted, and the lights dimmed, plunging the chamber into twilight. The guards spun, their scanner beeping wildly. Alex seized the chaos, sprinting to the console with Jake. His shard of tech scraped its surface as he pried open a panel, exposing circuits alive with alien energy. Jake's hands flew, rerouting commands, his memory of the ship's systems guiding him. The cages hummed louder, their locks clicking. One by one, they began to open. Mia and Timmy darted between the cages, pulling wires from dazed children as they stirred. Some blinked awake, confusion clouding their eyes, while others slumped, too weak to move. Mia's fingers shook, but she pressed on, her teddy bear tucked under her arm as she worked. The guards rallied, their guttural shouts echoing. One raised its weapon, firing a blast that scorched a cage near Sarah. She rolled aside, snatching a loose pipe and hurling it at the soldier's legs. It stumbled, buying time. Alex joined her, wrestling a fallen weapon from its grip. A sleek, humming rifle he barely understood but aimed anyway. Jake's console sparked, a final command surging through. The remaining cages hissed open, spilling their captives onto the floor. A dozen children staggered upright, some clutching each other, others staring blankly. Mia's heart leapt. Numbers meant hope. The guards charged, their armor shrugging off Alex's shaky shots. Sarah lunged, driving her pipe into a soldier's knee joint, cracking it. The alien roared, swinging at her, but she dodged, her agility outpacing its bulk. Timmy, small and swift, darted under a guard's legs, yanking cables from its armor's power pack. It faltered, stumbling into its comrade. The freed children stirred, some finding strength in the chaos. A boy grabbed a shard of metal, swinging it clumsily at a guard's arm. A girl kicked at another's shin, her defiance raw. The tide shifted, messy and desperate. Jake ripped a final wire from the console, and the chamber's lights flared, then died. Darkness swallowed them, broken only by the guards' glowing visors and the cage's fading pulses. Alex fired again, the rifle's blast illuminating a soldier's collapse. Mia rallied the group, her silent gestures urging them toward a side tunnel. They ran, freed captives stumbling alongside, their steps unsteady but driven by instinct. The guards pursued, their heavy boots pounding, but the darkness was the children's ally now. The tunnel twisted upward, its walls slick with condensation. Mia's lungs burned, her teddy bear bouncing against her side. Behind, the chamber's chaos faded, replaced by the ship's ceaseless drone. They emerged into a supply hold, its shelves stacked with alien gear. Tools, perhaps weapons. Alex barricaded the entrance with crates, his chest heaving. Sarah scanned the hold, spotting a crate of glowing orbs. Data or explosives, she couldn't tell. Jake examined one, his mind racing to decipher it. Timmy helped a freed girl sit, her eyes clearing as fear gave way to gratitude. Mia looked at them all, battered, outnumbered but unbroken. They'd cracked the Zorathians' grip, freed their own. The ship trembled again, its systems fraying under their rebellion. Somewhere out there, their signal might still be flying, a beacon to those who could fight. They weren't done. The bridge loomed in their future, the heart of this beast. For now, they rested, gathering strength amid the spoils of their daring. The Zorathians had taken them, but they had underestimated the storm they'd unleashed. The supply hold buzzed with quiet defiance, its shadowed corners filled with scavenged gear and the ragged breaths of the freed children. Mia sat among them, her teddy bear resting on her lap, its worn fur a silent witness to their struggle. Alex paced, clutching the alien rifle, its weight unfamiliar but empowering. Jake examined a glowing orb from the crate, his mind piecing together its purpose. Likely a disruptor, volatile and potent. Sarah sharpened a metal shard into a crude blade, her scratched arm bandaged with a torn sleeve. Timmy handed out tools to the others, his small hands steady as he rallied their new allies, a dozen dazed but awakening souls from the cages. The ship groaned, its hull straining under the chaos they'd sown. Sabotaged engines stuttered, sending tremors through the floor, while distant alarms wailed like a wounded beast. Their signal had flown into the void, and the freed captives were proof they could break the Zorathians' hold. But to end this, they needed the bridge. the ship's nerve center. Alex gestured toward a sealed hatch, its runes pulsing faintly. Jake approached, his shard of tech scraping its edges until it hissed open, revealing a service corridor beyond. The air inside was frigid, laced with the sharp scent of coolant and burnt wiring. Mia rose, her resolve a quiet fire, and led the group forward, the freed children trailing with makeshift weapons. Pipes, shards, anything they could wield. The corridor twisted upward, its walls narrowing as they climbed. Shadows danced under flickering lights, and the hum of the ship grew louder, more insistent. Sarah took point, her blade ready, while Alex guarded the rear, rifle trained on the dark. The freed children moved clumsily, their steps hesitant but fueled by a shared spark. Anger, hope, survival. A sudden clang echoed ahead, metal grinding against metal. The group froze as a maintenance drone whirred into view, sleek, insect-like, its sensors glowing red. Sarah lunged, driving her blade into its core before it could signal. Sparks flew, and it collapsed, twitching. They pressed on, the drone's wreckage a warning of the eyes watching them. The corridor spat them into a vast antechamber, its ceiling arched with crystalline panels that refracted starlight from a massive viewport. Beyond, hyperspace raged, a kaleidoscope of streaking lights signaling their approach to Zorath Prime. Across the room, a fortified door loomed, the bridge's threshold, guarded by 2 Zorathian sentinels. The soldiers stood like statues, their armor scarred from earlier skirmishes, weapons gleaming with lethal intent. Mia's heart thundered as she signaled the group to spread out, using the chamber's scattered debris, crates, pipes, shattered drones for cover. Jake clutched the orb, his thumb hovering over its activation node. One pulse, and it could unleash havoc. Sarah crept along the wall, her blade catching the light, while Alex motioned the freed children into position. Their eyes gleamed with raw defiance, hands trembling but firm. Timmy slipped behind a crate, his small size a shadow among giants. Jake nodded to Mia, and she threw a loose bolt across the room. It clattered, drawing the sentinel's gaze. In that split second, Jake triggered the orb, hurling it toward the guards. A deafening crack split the air as it erupted, unleashing a wave of crackling energy. The sentinels staggered, their armor sparking, visors dimming. Sarah charged, slamming her blade into a soldier's knee joint, toppling it. Alex fired the rifle, its blasts erratic, but enough to pin the second guard. The freed children surged forward, a chaotic swarm. Pipes swung, shards stabbed, their fury a tide against the alien's bulk. One guard fell, its helmet cracked by a boy's desperate blow. The second rallied, its weapon roaring to life. A blast grazed Alex's shoulder, searing his flesh, but he gritted his teeth and fired back, hitting its chest. Timmy darted beneath, yanking cables from its power pack, a trick he'd learned in the cage chamber. The soldier crumpled, lifeless. The bridge door loomed, its runes flaring as if sensing the breach. Jake rushed to it, his shard scraping its controls. Sparks flew, and the door groaned open, revealing a cavernous command center. Consoles lined the walls, their screens alive with star charts and data. At the helm stood a Zorathian officer. Taller, sleeker, its eyes glowing with cold fury. The officer turned, its claws tapping a command. Drones whirred from ceiling panels, smaller, faster than the last, their stingers glinting. Mia dove behind a console, her teddy bear slipping but caught mid-fall. Sarah met a drone head-on, her blade slicing its wing, while Alex fired at another, his aim sharpening despite the pain. The freed children scattered, some cowering, others fighting. Pipes clashed against metal shells, sparks raining down. Jake reached a central terminal, his hands flying over its runes. He found the ship's navigation. An override could lock their course, trap them in hyperspace, or worse. The officer lunged, its claws slashing toward Jake. Mia leapt, shoving her teddy bear into its path. A distraction, soft but enough. The claws tore through it, and Jake dodged, slamming a command into the terminal. The ship lurched violently, screens flashing red as systems screamed in protest. Drones faltered, some crashing, and Sarah finished the last with a brutal swing. The officer roared, but Alex tackled it, pinning it long enough for the freed children to swarm. Blows rained down, crude but relentless, until it stilled. The bridge fell silent, save for the ship's dying hum. Mia retrieved her torn bear, her chest heaving. Jake's override had worked. The ship was locked, spiraling off course. Beyond the viewport, hyperspace twisted, a prison of their making. They'd taken the helm. The Zorathians' future teetered on the edge, and the children held the blade. The bridge trembled under the children's feet, its consoles sparking and screens flickering with chaotic streams of data. Mia stood at the center, her torn teddy bear clutched in one hand, its stuffing spilling like a wound. Around her, Alex gripped the alien rifle, his shoulder raw but steady. Jake hunched over the navigation terminal, his fingers dancing across runes to hold the ship's spiraling course. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow, her makeshift blade stained with alien oil. Timmy clung to a scavenged tool, his small frame dwarfed by the freed children, now a ragged army, scattered across the room, their eyes alight with fragile hope. Beyond the viewport, hyperspace churned, a violent maelstrom of light and shadow, the ship locked in its grip by Jake's override. The Zorathian officer lay still, its sleek form broken by their collective fury. But the fight wasn't over. The ship groaned, its systems fraying, and faint thuds echoed from beyond the sealed door, reinforcements clawing to reclaim control. Mia's gaze swept the bridge, landing on a massive console pulsing with crimson light. The ship's core command: destroy it, and the Zorathians' plans might collapse with it. She pointed, and Alex nodded, his rifle humming as he took position. Sarah moved to the door, barricading it with debris, her scratched arm trembling but unrelenting. Jake abandoned the navigation, joining Mia at the core console. His shard of tech scraped its surface, exposing a tangle of glowing conduits, lifeblood of the ship's power. He yanked one free, and a shudder rippled through the floor, lights dimming. The freed children watched, some clutching pipes, others huddled but ready, their trust in the five unwavering. A deafening bang shook the door, metal buckling under Zorathian fists. Sarah braced it, her blade wedged into the frame, but cracks spiderwebbed outward. Alex fired at the console, blasts searing its shell, while Jake worked deeper, severing cables, rerouting energy into a feedback loop. Sparks rained, stinging Mia's skin, but she held her ground, her teddy bear a quiet defiance. The viewport flared as hyperspace warped, a star blooming unnaturally bright. A human ship answering their signal. Mia's chest tightened. Rescue was near, but they had to finish this. Jake's hands faltered, then pressed a final rune. The console screeched, its crimson glow surging, then collapsing into darkness. A chain reaction erupted. Consoles burst, flames licking the walls, the ship's systems imploding. The door gave way, Zorathian soldiers storming through. 5, then 10, their armor scarred but relentless. Sarah met them head-on, her blade slashing a visor, forcing one back. Alex fired, his shots wild but deadly, dropping 2. The freed children surged, a chaotic wave. Pipes swung, shards stabbed, their raw will a force the aliens couldn't predict. Timmy darted beneath a soldier, jamming his tool into its power pack. It crumpled, smoke curling from its joints. Mia grabbed a fallen cable, its end live with energy, and thrust it into another's chest. The alien convulsed, collapsing in a heap. The ship bucked, its hull splitting as the core's failure spread. Through the viewport, the human vessel loomed closer, a sleek frigate, its weapons blazing, tearing into the Zorathian fleet trailing behind. Mia's eyes watered. New Horizon had heard them. The remaining soldiers faltered, their movements sluggish as the ship disintegrated. Jake raced to a secondary panel, triggering escape pods. Dozens launched, carrying the last captives to safety. Sarah shoved the freed children toward a nearby pod bay, her strength guiding them as the floor cracked beneath. Alex grabbed Mia, pulling her from the chaos while Timmy clung to her side. They reached a pod, its hatch hissing open and piled in. Jake last, his shard tucked away like a trophy. Sarah slammed the launch command and the pod shot free, the bridge dissolving in fire behind them. Through the pod's small window, Mia watched the Zorathian ship fracture, a leviathan undone by their hands. Debris spiraled into hyperspace, consumed by the void. The human frigate loomed, its bay doors opening to scoop up the pods, a beacon of home. Inside, silence settled, broken only by the pod's hum. Mia clutched her ruined teddy bear, its loss a price for their survival. Alex slumped, rifle discarded, his wound a badge of their fight. Jake stared at the shard, a faint smile tugging his lips. Human minds had outwitted alien might. Sarah flexed her hands, blade still in her grip, her spirit unbroken. Timmy nestled close, his tool a small victory. The pod docked, and human hands pulled them free. Soldiers, medics, parents from New Horizon, their faces a mix of shock and pride. Mia stumbled into her mother's arms, the teddy bear falling, its purpose served. The freed children emerged, some weeping, others standing tall, their chains shattered. Beyond, the Zorathian fleet faltered, their flagship gone, their empire wounded by the smallest of foes. The signal, the sabotage, the rebellion, it had all unraveled their future. Mia looked to her friends, their bond forged in fire. They'd been taken as prey, but they'd returned as warriors. The stars stretched ahead, no longer a cage, but a promise. They'd won.